thing we're going to start with first is talking about projects, because up until this point, we've really been focused on events. We've really been focused on the event library, the event browser, and organizing our clips in the event browser. So the second half of working in Final Cut Pro 10 is working with projects, and projects are our timelines. Final Cut projects are timelines, so this is where we're going to build our story. So there's a lot that goes into setting it up to make sure that it actually is set up correctly to work with our media from our event. So now that we understand what projects are, we know we can use media from any event or multiple events. So what that means is if we have 4 events, and it doesn't, we have just media scattered across different events, but we only have one project, we can still use media from those other events in our one project. And it's a really cool thing. No longer do we have to import our media into every project we're working on. Like back in the day, if I was going to be doing a project, let's say for one of my clients is L'Oreal USA. Let's say I was going to do a series of 4 videos for L'Oreal, and I wanted to have 4 separate project files. So I would create the first project file and edit the video, and I'd have to import all the video I shot, okay? But L'Oreal, we only did 1 shoot, but we're making 4 videos. So each one of those projects, I'd have to re-import all the footage into each of those project files and then hit save every time I make changes and all that kind of thing. Because Final Cut Pro 10 has changed all of that, we can have multiple events, like multiple days of shooting, and multiple projects, and we can all share assets, which is fantastic. So with that in mind, you just have to keep that in mind when working with projects, that even though you have multiple events, you can still grab media from different events and use them in your projects. And it can be a little confusing, but it is helpful to know that we can do that, because there's no limit to the number of events or projects that you can have. So projects are always linked to an event. All right? We never have a project that's not linked to an event. Even if you're using media from multiple events in one project, that one project has to link to one of those events. Okay? It's just the nature of the beast. That's the way it has to work. Okay? So projects are timelines, and timelines have 2 very distinct features in Final Cut Pro 10. This is so important to understand, and we will get into this in depth, because these 2 things I'm about to list were like the things that when people first opened Final Cut Pro 10 and started working with clips went, what the heck is going on? I can't just put things where I want anymore. That's because these 2 distinct features are present in Final Cut Pro projects. One, all projects have a primary storyline. We'll illustrate that in a minute. And all projects are a magnetic timeline. All right? So they have a primary storyline, and they are magnetic. All right? Which means you can't just put things wherever you want all the time. All right? So we're going to get into that. We'll kind of explain how that works very soon. There are no tracks. Media can be placed anywhere on the timeline as long as you abide by certain rules. All right? And this is what an older timeline used to look like. So this is Final Cut Pro 7. All right? And in this timeline, if you look up at the top half of that, the blue are video clips. The green are audio clips. And they're all stacked in lines going across. You can actually see the lines. You have V tracks 1 through, I think, 5 up top, and audio tracks 1 through 6 on the bottom. And those act as, I think of it as like a horse track. You ever watch a horse race and they all line up in the gate? They all come shooting out? Well, that's what the tracks were. They were designed to keep things in line. Okay, so we no longer have that in Final Cut Pro 10. Now the timeline in Final Cut Pro 10, there's no tracks, except for one track that goes right down the middle of that timeline. That's the primary storyline. All right, we're going to get to what that is in a minute. Notice also in this picture that blue and green still represent audio and video. But what's different? Anybody? Right. You can put audio up top. You can put video on the bottom. It doesn't matter. No longer does video have to be on top and audio on the bottom. You can put video, you can put just your music on the bottom and have all your dialogue up on top. Doesn't matter. It gives you this whole new frontier of which to work with in Final Cut Pro 10. It's really interesting. So there's no specified place for video outside of the primary storyline. No specified place for audio, so to speak, and we'll explain this more. Both video and audio can be placed anywhere on the timeline. Okay? Project timelines, we're going to figure out, we're going to teach you in this segment how to create a new project timeline, how to append video clips onto our timeline, how to edit, move, and trim clips on our timeline, how to understand what the primary storyline is and how to work with it, and we're going to get familiar with working in a magnetic timeline. All right? If you haven't not seen this in action yet, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But once I show you, you'll totally understand what I'm talking about. So let's move over to Final Cut Pro and let's kind of get into this a little bit. All right, so in the last couple segments, we worked with our tutorial event and we brought in some video clips of Vanessa. This is all the raw footage from her yoga promo video here on Creative Live. We've got a mix of B-roll and some interview stuff, and we have a track of audio here. And we're just going to create a project now to edit some of this video. All right? But before we can create a project, we have to understand where projects go and how to set one up correctly. Down here on the bottom, in the project library, we talked about this earlier on in the day, these are where our projects are going to be stored. Essentially, what the project library is a visual reference of what's in our Final Cut Projects folder on our media drive. So, we have two hard drives connected to our computer. We have a Mac HD hard drive, which is our system drive. We don't have any media on that. We don't want to put any projects on that. We want to keep our events and projects together on the work drive. This is a separate internal work drive we have. If I tree this down, we have some folders here, and within these folders, we have timelines. We have projects. These are all individual projects, okay? And like I said before, we can grab them, we can skim over them, we can kind of see what's in them. We're going to create a new one. We don't have to create a folder for it at this point. You don't have to put things in folders. I just do that for my own organizational sanity. We're going to create a new project by coming down here to the bottom and clicking on the plus sign. And when I do that, it's going to create a new project, but it's going to ask me a couple questions first. It's going to ask me what I want to name it. I like to name my projects similar to what my event is named. All right, this helps me to keep track of what projects are associated to what events. All right, so our event name is tutorial. We'll call this tutorial project. Works for me. By default, because I have the tutorial event selected over here in the event library, it's automatically going to default to tutorial event here on this drop-down box. However, I could associate this project I'm about to create with any of these events if I wanted to. We're going to associate it with tutorial right there. Okay, this box right here that says use custom settings, this is going to open up a whole new world for us. Boom. Lots of different things happening here, okay? We have something called starting time code, and it's set to all zeros. Basically what that means is when we create our project down here, it's going to start with time code 00000000. Why are there 4 sets of 2 zeros? Well, it's very simple. Time code works like this. These first 2 digits are hours, second ones are minutes, third one seconds, last one frames. Okay, if we're shooting 24 frames per second on our footage, we would get a 24 frame count for every 1 second of video. All right? I leave this at 0. There's no reason to change this unless you have a specific reason, which we probably won't even cover in this course. Video properties, set based on first video clip. What that means is, if I just allow Final Cut to use this default setting, the first video clip that I drag down or append to that project timeline will be the project settings. So if I just did that, it would say, okay, well, the clip that you put on here, this is the first clip. It's shot at 1920 by 1080 resolution. It was shot at 24 frames per second, and the audio sample rate is 48 kilohertz. It would automatically set the project settings for that. It's a great idea to do this if you know all of your footage is the exact same shot the exact same way. If you have mixed frame rates, like you've shot some of your footage at 60 frames per second, and you shot some of it at 24 frames per second, you might want to use custom settings just so you can set it up manually to whichever you need first. All right? You can always change this later on, but it's going to mean re-rendering if you have to go back and change things that have already been applied and rendered. So, in this case, all of this footage we're working with is 1080p HD footage. The resolution is 1920 by 1080. The frame rate is 23.98. Okay? It's essentially the same thing as 24. There's slight differences. We're not going to go into that now. All right? But that's the footage native frame rates. We're going to leave it alone. Audio and render properties, if we went down here to custom, we have a couple different options. Audio channels. All of the audio that I've captured is either mono or stereo. And we're going to get into that when we start talking about audio. But I'm going to leave this at stereo. If I had plans to create a surround sound mix when I'm all done, you'd want to set this to surround. Make sure you're not working in surround if you have no plans to use surround sound. Okay? And if you don't even know what that means, you probably shouldn't even be using it. So just leave it alone. Surround sound is a whole different beast in itself. Audio sample rate, 48 kilohertz per second. That is standard for video. If you ever see any video editing timeline settings that are not set to 48, and you're using video camera footage or DSLR footage, you should be set to 48 kilohertz per second. That's the standard for video production. The render format, we talked about this before. This is our transcoded media. Final Cut Pro 10 will always transcode optimized footage to Apple ProRes 422. So we want our project to match that. If the project is set to something else, like 422 LT or 4444, every time we put a clip down on the timeline that's been optimized, we'd have to render it. Okay? We don't want to have to deal with that. We want them to match. So it's not a big deal. The rendering doesn't take long, but it's still something that it's unnecessary. And it creates files that we really don't need to have. So I just keep this at Apple ProRes 422. Unless I've pre-transcoded my footage to 422 LT, but again, we're not going to go down that road right now. Okay, so now that we've dialed in all of our project settings, we're ready to create our project. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to double check again before I do this that the default event is tutorial. It is. The project name is tutorial project. Good. Here we go. Let's click OK. And what's going to happen is we went from the project library, it created the project, and then it automatically opened it. All right, so now down here on the bottom, we now have a timeline window. We no longer have the project gallery or project library. Anytime I want to get back to the project library, it's very simple. All I have to do is go down here to the little reel, click that, and it'll give me back to the project library. Okay, I'm going to double click this. Here's another way you can get back to the project library, and this is I'm going to introduce you to the timeline history buttons. These buttons right here, a little back and a little forward button. This, if you click this back button, it will take you to the last place you were. So if I was working on a timeline before I went to this timeline, it would take me back to that timeline. Since the only thing we worked on before this was the project library, it's going to take me back to the project, or I'm sorry, it will take me back to the previous timeline that I used before. So before we even started this program, I had been working in some other timelines. So if I want to get back to one of those timelines, I can use this timeline history. It'll take me back to the last timeline that I viewed. To get back to the project library, you click the little reel on the bottom. Sorry for any confusion there. Okay, if I want to see which timelines I've worked with, if I hold down, it'll give me a list of all the timelines I've been working with. All right, so for example, if I click back and it takes me to this other timeline that we had open before, I can click forward now and it'll bring me back into the timeline I just created. All right, we'll use this later when we get into using multiple projects and working with multiple projects. Okay, let's talk about this timeline window for a minute. There's a couple things in here we really need to understand. I was explaining before about the primary storyline. This gray bar, the dark gray bar that runs down the middle of the timeline, that is the primary storyline. When we start appending footage to our timeline from our media browser, from our event browser, by default, it has to go first to the primary storyline. Let me break this down for you. This is how I like to explain this. Imagine this timeline is a desert, okay? And you're driving from Vegas to LA, all right? It's just wide open desert. This primary storyline, the gray bar, is the highway, okay? That's the highway. And highways have rules. Highways have traffic laws. Highways have lanes, okay? This is a highway that runs through the desert. All of this area, the light gray shaded area on either side of the highway, that's open desert. It's wild frontier. It's the wild, wild west. Anything can happen in that area, all right? Keep that in mind as we move forward here, and I think this will be a little bit easier to grasp, all right? So we have our highway, which is the dark gray bar, and we have our light gray area here. Anything I bring down, that's the first thing I ever bring down from the top here, and we're going to get into how to bring things down more specifically in a minute, but if I just bring something down, by default, I just hit the E key to append that to the timeline, it automatically goes to the primary storyline. okay? The primary storyline will be the basis for where we start laying down our main action, okay? So in this particular instance, in this video, let me just illustrate this. I'm going to go back to the actual pre-bake, the actual finished video of Vanessa's yoga video here, okay? Her interview, her talking head, these two shots, this wide shot and this close-up of her talking, if I play this back,
take a toll on my body. I knew if I kept going the way that I was, my photography career was not going to last as long as I wanted it to.
That's our main action. The primary storyline is meant for your main action. It's meant to be the root, the anchor of your video. All this other stuff that's happening above and below it in the wild frontier on either side of that highway can go wherever it wants. I can move this stuff around, I can reposition it, all that kind of great stuff. If I try to move something down here, there's more of an order to things. Things are not going to just be placed wherever I want. It's going to start grabbing other things. There are rules associated with this primary storyline that we have to follow, otherwise we're going to find ourselves in deep doo-doo. Okay? We don't want to find ourselves in deep doo-doo. All right? So the primary storyline, when I start moving footage down from my event browser, is going to automatically start applying itself to the primary storyline. I'm going to hit Shift-Z to zoom out here. I just grabbed any old random clip here. I'm just grabbing random clips. I'm hitting E to append it. You see how automatically it's going down to that primary storyline. Okay? Now I can drag something down from here and put it up on the top or on the bottom, but I can't append to that. I can, there's other ways. We'll get to that in a minute. All right? So basically, the primary storyline is our main highway, and it is meant for our main action, and all the other stuff will go elsewhere. All right? For now. Again, this is subject, the rules can be broken, but we'll get into that later. So what I want to focus on right now is how to efficiently get clips from this media browser window, or media viewer, down the event browser, down here onto the timeline. Okay, there's a couple different ways we can do this. Remember before we set ranges of clips? And we kind of went through and we dragged, and we hit, or we just JKL'd, so I hit J and L. And I hit I to set an in. We'll set an in right there. Oh, let's wait for a good clip here. This is me just testing. It's actually not a good clip. Let's go to the next one. I'm going to hit arrow down. That's going to take me to my next one. I'm going to hit L and just let it play. I'm going to wait for a good starting point. I'm going to hit I to start. She bends over. And I want this clip to stop right there. Oh, okay. So I've defined a range here that I want to bring down onto my timeline. There's a couple different ways we can do this. We can either just click and drag it down onto our primary storyline. We can use keyword shortcut or keyboard shortcut E for append. Okay? And the way append works, if I have multiple clips, stacking them, append using the E command will always put it one right after another on the primary storyline. Okay? We can also come down here to our toolbar and select this. We can select this E option right here for append and just click that. I hardly ever use these buttons, guys. Honestly, I always either use either drag it down or I just hit E. It's the fastest way to get things down to the timeline rather than coming down and clicking another button. But that's another way you could do it. I'm just going to delete these clips for now. Okay? So that's one way. Another way to get things down from here down to the timeline is to use an insert edit. Okay? So if I place this playhead in the middle of this existing clip and I choose another clip range, let's just say, for instance, let's grab our favorites. Remember before we marked some favorites? Boom, there's our favorites. And let's go up here and we'll see the rest of the favorites. Good. Okay? Let me actually just grab. Looks like we only marked one favorite. Let's just, let's just skip that because I don't want to confuse anybody by going with favorites. Let's just do this. All right, so let's say, for example, let's just grab this clip right here. I'm going to define a range. If I hit W, watch what happens down here on the timeline. It split the original clip and it inserted the new clip right in the middle. And it shifted this second half of that first clip over to the end. I'll do it again to kind of show it to you. Command Z to undo. Come up to the top, grab our clip again, W to insert, and there it is. It inserted it right in the middle. Okay, so that's another way you can do that. All right. You can also insert by clicking this button right here. There you go. That's an insert edit. Okay. We can also use another insert command. It's more of an overwrite command, and the command is keyboard shortcut D. Now watch what happens when I do this. I'm going to take this clip, highlight it, put my playhead somewhere in the middle of our first existing clip, and I'm going to hit D. D is for overwrite. Watch what happens. Okay, so it overwrote everything from that point where my playhead was. I'll do it again. Let's put the playhead here this time. When I click D, it overwrites the clip on the primary storyline. So those are the three ways we can get clips from our event browser down onto the primary storyline, which is where our main action will be. So if I have an interview with Vanessa, and let's say I cut this up into sound bites, that's my first sound bite, I'd hit E and drop it down there. Now it's a long clip, so I need to shift Z to kind of see the rest of my timeline, or I can zoom out down here. Okay. Notice how it automatically put the playhead at the end of the video clip when I appended it. Let's go get her second soundbite, and I'm hypothetically editing here. Let's grab a second part of her soundbite, append. Let's grab another part of her interview, append. So this is how I would lay out the main story action. The interview is the main action. I'm just putting my soundbites down here on the primary storyline, and this is what we call a radio cut. It's a radio edit. Why? We're just getting the main story fleshed out down here. We're cutting around her sound bites where she starts talking, stops talking, starts talking, stops talking, and is putting them together down on the primary storyline. Okay? Using E to append, we'll put them side by side. Using W, we'll split that first clip in half. Okay? Using D, we'll overwrite it completely. All right? I know I'm moving around a little faster. I'll slow down. Okay? Now, that's the primary storyline. Watch what happens if I try to move something on the primary storyline. I can't just put it over here. It snaps back. Okay? That's because this is a magnetic timeline. This is very unique to Final Cut Pro 10. They put a magnetic timeline in here that makes it so we have highway rules and regulations to abide by on the primary storyline. Why do they do this? You're going to see throughout the rest of this workshop that this is meant to keep things together. Okay? Why do we want to keep things together? Well, if I cut a scene and I've got not just my main action, but other clips up here on the top and other clips down here on the bottom, and I go to move the main part of that scene, I want everything kept together. I want all those clips to be married to this main action. So that brings us to our next method of bringing clips down from the event browser to our timeline. We're going to use what's called a connected edit. All right? So we have Vanessa talking about seated yoga positions, let's just say. Okay, she's talking about sitting down and doing yoga. Well, I'm going to grab a shot of her sitting down as B-roll because I don't want to see her just talking the whole time. I want to cut away to a shot that shows her doing and demonstrating what she's talking about. So we'll grab a shot here, I to set an in point, hit space to play it, stop, hit O. I've got my range selected. Now, I can either grab this clip and drag it down and place it on top, or I can use keyboard shortcut Q for connect. Okay, and wherever my playhead is, it will connect that clip. Why is it called a connected clip? This is why. Watch this. If I grab the primary storyline main action clip and I move it, those other clips stay with it. Okay? This is nice. This keeps things from moving out of sync. Or not necessarily out of sync, but keeps you from making mistakes and changing your edit and slipping things out from where they should be. So that's meant to do that. All right? So that can get confusing when we have multiple things happening here, but I wanted to kind of illustrate what connected edits are. Now, if I zoom in here, you see that little line? That line indicates that this clip is connected to this clip. If I drag one of these clips over here on top of this one, it doesn't get connected to this clip, it stays connected to this clip. Connected clips are always connected to clips on a primary storyline. All right? Anything. If I take another shot and put it down here, it's still connected to my primary storyline clip. And it can't move unless I move it independently, right? Now you wouldn't see that clip because it's, the timeline works like this. It only shows you what's on top, okay? So you'll notice if I play this back, now we're seeing the primary storyline, then it's going to cut to our top clip, and then it's going to cut back when that clip ends. And now watch what happens when it hits that one on the bottom. We don't see it because it's underneath our action. I would have to move it to the top in order to see it. Okay? So, I know it's rudimentary, but that's really important to understand that clips can be married. I say married, it's just like the term I like to use. It's married to this main action clip. Well, what happens if I resize, and we haven't gotten the trimming yet, but we will. If I start resizing this, watch what happens. The clips go, wait for me, mommy. They still want to stay connected to that clip. All right? They're not going to just decide, okay, well, now we're on our own. It's going to stay married to that clip. Okay? So, that's how connected clips work. So, the different types of edits, we have E for append. E will append your clip. W will insert if I wanted to cut it in half. Here's one part, here's the other. Here's the new clip. We have overwrite. By hitting the D command, we'll overwrite it from that point of my playhead. And then we have connected clips, which work by hitting the Q key on the keyboard. Connected clips. Everybody got that? Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So now that we sort of understand how married clips work, there's other things we can do to get video clips back to, down here on our timeline. We can, let's say, for example, we have Vanessa talking here. Let's actually get a shot of Vanessa talking. Let's go up here. It doesn't matter what. We're not worried about the audio right now. So we'll append that down to our primary storyline. I just dragged it. That's all I did. Or hit E. And let's grab some B-roll. So let's say we want to use this shot right here. Okay? But I know I don't want the audio. There is audio associated to this clip. How do I know there's audio associated to this clip? Well, I can play it back and hear it.
And then arms or chest up.
Okay? Or I can just look here, and I see that there's an audio waveform that tells me that there's audio on that clip. But I don't want that audio. I just want the video. So when we play this back, it's not conflicting with the audio from Vanessa talking. Well, we can do it a couple of different ways. We can come down here to these buttons I never use and click next to these edit options, and we can choose whether we want the video only or audio only, or both. All would mean we're bringing down both video and audio. So in this case, I would just select video only. Or I can hit, the easier way for me to do that would be to, while I'm still up here, hit keyboard shortcut Shift 2. And you'll notice down here that something changed. Okay? Originally, these were little white icons, meaning that there's both audio and video associated with that. When I hit Shift 2, it turns blue, and it gives me a little person, little head in a box. That just means it's going to bring down the audio, or the video rather. And if I want to bring down just the audio, I would use Shift 3. Oh, sorry, I have to be selected up here. Shift 3, and now you see you have a little green audio icon, and that means it'll just bring down the audio of the clip. So let's reset this, and I'll demonstrate. So from this point right here, if I want to connect this clip with just the video, no audio, Shift 2. You'll see my icons turn blue, and now I can hit Q for my connected edit, and you'll notice that there's no audio now. There's no more waveform associated with that clip. It's just the video. So when I play this back, I'm only going to hear the audio from down below.
And control eye strain and stress.
Okay? If I wanted just the audio, we would do the same thing, Shift 3, and hit connected edit, and it put it down here, and that's just the audio from that clip. Now, notice something. It's green. It's not blue. Audio clips are green, video clips are blue. And it put it down on the bottom of, put it underneath the primary storyline, not above. That's because, by default, Final Cut says, okay, well, I think video clips should go on the top and audio clips should go on the bottom. But then we can move that wherever we want. We can put the audio up here if we want. Doesn't matter. All right? So, many, many different things we can do. If you just want to pull down video only or audio only, those would be the ways to do it. We can also use these hot buttons right here. Or we can use our Shift 1, 2, and 3 keyboard commands. Okay? Great. Let me show you something really cool. Let's say, for instance, we are working up here in our event browser, and we're just defining ranges of clips, and we're putting them down here on the timeline really fast. Well, I like to be, for this part I want to just use my keyboard. I really don't want to use the mouse much because I feel like I'm clicking and dragging too much and then I have to come down here and do all this stuff. We can do this with just keys, which makes it really fast. So let's say, for example, let's start up here on this clip. We're going to use our J, K, and L commands and our I and O commands to set our in and outs. And I'm going to hit L and just play through this stuff. All right, I'm going to wait for a good shot.
And go.
I'm going to hit I, set the in. O to set the out. Q to connect. Okay? When I connected it, whoops, well, you see what happened there is just the audio. So let's undo that. We're going to hit Shift 1, or let's do Shift 2. I'll just take the video down. All right? Now, I'm working primarily down here in the project timeline. I need to be up in the event browser, okay? So I can use Command 1 will activate this window. And you'll know it's activated because it went from dark gray to light gray. See the change there? I click this window, and our Wild Wild West frontier gets brighter, back and forth. Okay, we can do that with keyboard commands to make this action really fast. All right, so let's go back in here and start from scratch. So let's I in, press space bar, out, okay, Shift 2 just to bring down the video, connected the clip, good. Down, or Command 1 will bring us back up into the events browser, and now I can use my arrow key to go to my next clip. Let's hit L to play it, and I'm just going to do this and let you guys kind of see what I'm doing here.
So that's just a really short move.
Just waiting for a good shot. I'll fast forward a little bit, get to it a little faster. Okay, that looks good. I in, spacebar to play. Shot looks good to me. I'm going to hit stop, set the out point, Q to connect my clip. Command 1 brings me back up to the events, right, down arrow. And I can continue this process just on my keyboard. So I can connect clips, I can go to my next one, I can play it, and I'm never having to touch the mouse, which makes things really fast for me in editing. So I can go multiple clips here, and let's go back up and grab that wide shot here. Let's just play this out and see how it goes. I like the wide shot. Let's go. Let it play. I hit L to play, I to set the in, O to set the out, Q to connect. Command 1 brings me back up to the events window. See how fast that is? And I can just go through all my footage and bring things down. It's especially helpful when we've marked favorites. So let's just mark a bunch of favorites here, for example. Favorite, favorite. Notice the green line above it. Favorite, favorite. And now I'm going to tell Final Cut, OK, show me just the favorites. All right, and I want to start connecting these down here. Well, these are all my favorites. I know these are all good shots because I've already marked them as favorites, right? Well, I can just go through these, connected edit, next clip, play it just to make sure. Looks good. Maybe set a new endpoint by hitting I, Q, connected edit. Whoa, that's too long. Okay, so let's undo. We'll go Command 1 to get back up into the events window. We'll play the clip. We'll set a new out point because that was way too long. I'm just playing it using the space bar. K to stop. Set the end, Q, next clip. Okay, so you can see just by using keystrokes, I can go through and edit my stuff really quickly. And that's, I mean, and it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other. It all depends on how you want to do this, but I like to be very efficient during this part of it. So if you wanted to, you could still come up here and set ranges or just press in and out and then use your append tools to bring them down. However you want to do it is fine. That's just the fastest method for me to get things down onto the timeline. So in a nutshell, we just kind of covered how to get clips down onto the timeline. Now, we need to talk a little bit more about what we do with the clips now that they are down here on the timeline. So now that we've got a bunch of things happening down here, I'm just going to get rid of these two because they're too similar to our main action. We have Vanessa talking down here on the bottom, and then we have some B-roll shots, which I want. So I'm just going to move these over. I'm just a little housekeeping here. There, okay. So what I want to start doing now is trimming these clips, all right? The way trimming works on the timeline is simply by clicking and dragging a clip to resize or to re-extend or detract from the length of the clip, all right? So if I come down here to my primary storyline and I want to trim the front of it, maybe to this point right here where my playhead is, I can simply come over here with my mouse, grab the front. You'll notice that the very front of the clip now turned yellow, and I can just click, left click and drag, and it will resize that clip. It looks a little weird because what's happening here is we have this like no man's land. It's just, all this is doing is bringing the start of the project timeline up to the point where you want things to start, okay? And because the first clip we put down here on the primary storyline is butted directly up against the start of the project timeline, there is no black or pre-roll to this video. The second I start it, we see video. Okay, there's no black there. If I wanted to fade up from black, we'd have to take additional steps. We're not worried about that right now. So I just trimmed the beginning of this clip up to where I wanted it. Now, if I want to trim the end, I can do that with no problem right here. But watch this. If I had another clip, I'm going to hit E to append this other clip down here, and I'm just going to trim this out to make it bigger. By the way, if you see red, that's the end of the clip. Right there, you see some red? That's at the end of the clip. There's no more to that particular video clip. If I want to now trim the end of this primary storyline clip, watch what happens to the clip after it. It comes with it. That can be a problem later on if you're trying to keep things in sync, right? So there's a couple different ways we can get around that. We'll get to that in a minute. But that's, just keep in mind that anything you trim on your primary storyline, by default, it's going to start pulling everything else with it. That's called rippling. All right? When you affect something, up here in time, and then you start moving it and it affects the rest of the timeline, it's called rippling. So we just have to be careful of that. I can trim any of these other clips out here in Wild Wild West with no problem. I can grab, the first frame of that clip. Let me actually get in here. It's a little tricky with the zoom on to kind of grab the beginning of a clip. There we go. I can grab this and just trim this all day long, and it's not going to affect anything before or after it. Remember, this is the Wild Frontier, the Wild Wild West. Anything goes. There are no rules. Rules? No rules. All right, just keep that in mind. Look what happened there. I trimmed this B-roll clip to extend past the one next to it, and it bumped it out of the way. That's cool, man. I like that. It means I'm not going to overwrite this clip. If I do that, it'll still remain the next clip in the sequence. Okay? If I extend something the other way, it'll do the same thing. It'll bump clips out of the way. If I grab and move a clip in our Wild Frontier and move it, it will bump things out of the way. All right? So it takes a little bit of getting used to when you're working in the program, but once you have a feel for the way this works, it's actually really, really fun and easy to work with. So just remember, rules down here on the primary storyline, no rules up here. We can do a lot more versatile edits up here. Okay, everybody understand that? Good. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom back out here. Just so you can see the whole timeline. You can also use Shift-Z, but that fills the window like this, but I'm just going to hold Option. You see that my zoom handle now has a little minus thing on it. I can just click to zoom out. This gives me a little bit more real estate to work with. Okay, cool. Now, let's talk for a second about trimming by frame, because there's going to be times where you don't want to make massive adjustments when you're trimming. We just want to work with a piece or just work frame by frame. And the way we would do that is, rather than clicking and dragging, by the way, do you see this window that popped up? Let me zoom in again. I know I'm moving around. I'll slow it down. Look what happened here. When I drag the end of this clip, you're seeing this little time code readout there. What that's telling me, the number on the left is the current length of that clip. I am now 2 seconds in one frame. This clip is 2 seconds in one frame long at that point. If I extend it out, it increases in time. Okay? The number on the right is telling me by how much I've increased it. Okay? So if the clip started out as 1 second and I grab it, come on, there we go. It's telling me, okay, now I've increased it by 1 second and it's now 2 seconds long. There, so on and so forth. But if I want to get frame accurate, because that number on the right, 08, that's the frames, that's the number of frames. We were 2 seconds and 8 frames into this clip. I can simply grab the beginning or the end of a video clip. Comma and period will allow me to trim 1 frame at a time. Okay, so the comma key nudges it left 1 frame. at a time. Comma or a period will allow me to go right 1 frame at a time. If I hold shift while I do this, it'll go 10 frames at a time. All right? So that's handy. It also comes in handy when you're moving clips. If I want to move clips, I can just use the comma key to go backwards 1 frame at a time and the period key to go forward 1 frame at a time. Hold down shift, it'll move it in increments of 10 frames at a time. Okay? This helps when you are up against other clips like this and you don't want to push that other one forward. I can simply nudge it left and right, okay, to get it where I want to go. Okay, well, now I just want to trim the end. I can just grab the handle on the end of the clip and nudge it until the other clip drops down. Okay? Just some precision movements that help you get familiar with working on the project timeline. Lots of different things we can do down here. It's just helpful to know how to navigate and how to work around it. Okay, let's take some questions at this point because I just gave you everything you kind of need to know about getting clips from the event browser down onto the project timeline. So let's see if anybody has any questions about that.
Excellent.
Yes, we have a question here. Let's go to the studio first.
Yeah, and you may be covering this later on, but does the magnetic property of the timeline prevent you from being able to jump around to edit? Like, so if you're editing to a song and you want to edit something towards the end and then go back and put together the beginning, you know, does that make it hard to do?
That's the next thing we're going to get to. Yep. There are ways to break the rules of the highway. So we're going to circumvent some rules in the next part. But
We're loving that whole highway, new frontier thing,
yeah,
too.
it helps to think
by
of it
the
like that.
way.
This way you have some structure to kind of wrap your mind around. Otherwise you look at it and go, well, I don't understand. Why does this do this and this doesn't? So highway, desert.
Excellent. Mark W. has a question about optimal setup. He says, Final Cut Pro 10 seems to really lag when I scroll through all the video thumbnails. What is the optimal setup to avoid this?
That sounds to me like it's his system. There's really no way. We've already gone up into our preferences and set playback to better performance, but that really doesn't affect skimming. Skimming is this, when I just run my playhead over video like this. Faster systems will allow this to happen at a quicker rate. Slower systems, you will get some lag. So,
And you did mention you can go back and watch the rewatch, or when you purchase the video, definitely you can check those out, you know, your list of what you're using.
yeah, having more than 8 gigs of RAM will help that. Having faster processors will help that. Closing applications that might be running in the background might help that. That sounds like more of a personalized system issue than anything else. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, a question from Ralph from Dubai. How to add a slug in between the clips in the main timeline?
We're getting there.
You're getting there? Okay.
Next thing we're going to show, though, it's directly related to what Anna